The stars shimmered in silence above Earth, but something unnatural broke the stillness. A jagged, onyx shape drifted beyond the moon, too symmetrical, too deliberate. In the low-orbit defense platform Aegis Station, Commander Lance Harrington stared at the blinking red icon on the holoscreen. He didn't blink. "Is that a satellite?" the junior officer asked, leaning in, his voice taut with disbelief. "No," Lance said, voice even, eyes sharp. "It's a ship. And it's not one of ours." More icons began to appear, each tagged with unknown identifiers. Then came the storm. Encrypted pings, distress signals from lunar listening posts, scrambled telemetry from Martian orbit. And then silence. Every screen went black. Lights flickered. A low vibration passed through the station, subtle but undeniable, like the hum of something ancient waking up. Then the voice arrived. It spoke through every frequency, every transmission line, every active speaker on Earth. "We demand tribute, humans. You will surrender your wealth, your labor, your young. In return, your species will survive." The voice was deep and reverberating, overlain with something almost musical, tones and harmonics that unsettled more than threatened. It spoke not as a warning, but as a certainty. Then the message vanished. Screens returned to normal. Comms reconnected. All across the station and the planet, people stood frozen. On Aegis Station, no one moved. No one spoke. Lance turned from the screen. "Get me Houston Command. Now." Full spectrum. Down on Earth, the message repeated itself in every language, played in city squares and atop embassy buildings, hijacking feeds from Beijing to Buenos Aires. The world had never heard anything like it, yet understood exactly what it meant. A demand. A threat. A proclamation of dominance. In Houston, under the buzz of flickering neon in a bar that hadn't seen renovation since the Reagan era, Jacob Granger sat with a glass of whiskey and a cigarette burning slowly between his fingers. The television behind the bar flickered, then turned black. Then came the voice. It played once, chilling every conversation into silence. After it ended, the room filled with whispered panic. Jacob drained his glass. He didn't react like the others. No visible tension. No fear. Just resignation. He lit another cigarette with a match, holding it for a moment before letting it burn down to his fingers. The door creaked open, and a man in military fatigues stepped in, scanned the room, and locked eyes with him. "Granger," the man said. "He needs you." Jacob stood. His leather jacket creaked as he moved. He didn't speak. He never did unless the words mattered. 15 minutes later, the black unmarked car eased into a private hangar at Ellington Field. Commander Lance Harrington was waiting under the wing of a grounded reconnaissance jet. He looked older than the last time Jacob had seen him. Gray crept through his buzz-cut hair and stress-carved lines under his eyes. The two men stood silently for a moment before Lance broke the quiet. "They showed up." "I heard," Jacob said. "They're not asking for negotiation. It's tribute or extinction." Jacob nodded slowly. "And you called me. That must mean you already know how this ends." Lance exhaled and folded his arms. "I need you off the leash. No oversight. No briefings. I'll handle the brass." "Who's the team?" "You'll have first pick." "Then I want Caleb Monroe, Deshaun Carter, Ethan Reeves, and Omar Kingston, if you can dig him out of whatever hole he's hiding in." Lance tilted his head. "That's a heavy crew." Jacob looked past him, toward the horizon where thunderclouds loomed like a warning. "So's the job." The first strike came 3 days later. A sliver of light sliced through the atmosphere, unseen by radar, and obliterated half of Liechtenstein in a silent flash. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a lesson, an example. The United Nations convened within hours, an emergency summit so chaotic it resembled a theater more than a council. Representatives shouted over one another. Some called for surrender. Others questioned the legitimacy of the threat. Only a few dared speak of retaliation. In the shadows of the assembly, Jacob sat silently, eyes fixed on the center hologram of the mothership parked in lunar orbit. He wore civilian clothes, but no one mistook him for an observer. A new transmission interrupted the summit. This time, a face accompanied the voice. The being that appeared had a head like a jagged helm, plated in segmented armor that pulsed with light. Its eyes burned with yellow luminescence. I am General Zurothka of the Kaldran Empire. This planet belongs to us now. Your delay is noted. You have 5 days. The hologram flickered out. Jacob stood, turned to the gathered diplomats and said, "You just let the enemy speak first. That's rule number 1. He left without waiting for permission. Back at the black site codenamed Bastion 9, the team assembled. Caleb Monroe, a lanky, sarcastic hacker with a caffeine addiction and a voice that rarely stopped. Deshaun Carter, all muscle and few words, a demolitions expert with a haunted gaze. Ethan Reeves, the youngest, a brilliant aerospace engineer who wore his nerves like a second skin. And finally, Omar Kingston, ex-SAS, face chiseled from marble, a sniper whose silence could drown a room. Jacob gave them their orders. We hit their scout ships first. Find the weaknesses. Hurt them just enough to make them notice. Then we vanish. Caleb grinned. Just like old times. The first mission was over Phobos, Mars' dead moon. A Kaldran recon vessel had been stationed there, collecting atmospheric and electromagnetic data. Jacob's team slipped in through a maintenance corridor after Omar neutralized the patrol. The inside of the ship was more like a cathedral than a craft. High arches, soft glowing glyphs, and air that felt too clean. They planted EMP charges in the core, sabotaged navigation systems, and uploaded a viral data worm to send false readings to the fleet. Caleb stayed behind just long enough to jam the emergency signal. They exfiltrated seconds before the ship detonated, casting metal and fire into Martian orbit. Back on Earth, news outlets reported a mysterious explosion in space. No one knew what had happened. The Kaldran fleet knew. For the first time in centuries, someone had hit them first. Zurothka responded swiftly. 2 Kaldran cruisers descended into Nevada. Their purpose was spectacle, not conquest. They hovered above the desert, released sound pulses that shattered windows across 6 cities, and broadcast another ultimatum: tribute within 3 days. Jacob's team met them in the Mojave, beneath the pretense of evacuation effort. The battle was swift, brutal, and one-sided. Deshaun's EMP mines disabled one of the cruisers mid-hover. Ethan's prototype plasma rifles tore through Kaldran armor. Omar picked off their officers with unerring calm. Jacob fought hand-to-hand with one of the Kaldran field commanders. The creature was taller, stronger, covered in iridescent scales. But Jacob moved with surgical rage, exploiting weaknesses no textbook could teach. He stabbed the alien through the throat with a carbon spike and whispered, "You forgot rule number 1," before letting its body hit the sand. The team vanished again before reinforcements arrived. Across Earth, resistance stirred. Whispers of the American Boogeyman spread, stories of a man who fought aliens without fear, who struck from the shadows and vanished like smoke. Jacob hadn't slept in 31 hours. He sat on a cracked crate in a burnt-out compound in Tunisia, peeling charred fabric from a healing burn across his arm. Ethan Reeves knelt nearby, soldering a new stabilizer to his exosuit's spinal frame. Sparks danced off his welding tool, illuminating a face hollowed by fatigue. "They're coming faster now," Ethan said without looking up. "I think they're adjusting their trajectory using static interference data. You know, learning." "They always learn," Jacob replied, pressing gauze to his arm. "That's why we need to keep changing the lesson." Deshaun Carter emerged from the shadows, carrying an alien weapon almost too heavy for a normal man to lift. He laid it at Jacob's feet. "Took this off one of their commanders. Doesn't match any known model." Jacob studied the weapon. Curved in places it shouldn't be, thrumming with internal resonance. Not standard issue. Not meant for grunts. "Zurothka's getting personal," he said. "Good," Deshaun muttered. "So am I." The three of them stood over Caleb Monroe's empty boot. No words. No ceremony. Just the wind pushing desert ash across the sand and into memory. Jacob carried Caleb's patch in his vest pocket. He didn't need reminders, just fuel. Omar Kingston, silent and unseen, rejoined them from his perch. His cloak was dusted with bone-colored grit, his rifle slung across his back. Dropship sighted. 4 hours maximum. Jacob nodded once. Then we take the fight to them. Far above the planet, aboard the Caldron mothership tethered to orbital silence, General Zurothka watched the patterns unfold. The human resistance was not fracturing as expected. It was concentrating. Like a virus forced into a corner, it had become unpredictable and more dangerous. He turned to his second-in-command, who stood rigid beneath the weight of expectation. "The Boogeyman," Zuroth said. "He festers beneath our skin." The subordinate hesitated. "We've identified multiple triangulation points. The resistance uses static dead zones and mineral shielding. We cannot pin them." Zuroth's claws clicked against the armrest of his command throne. "Then we bring him out." In Berlin, what was left of it, Jacob and the team coordinated the largest counterstrike since the fall of Geneva. Human militia groups, remnants of formal armies, and thousands of volunteers answered the call. Ethan's redesigned exosuits were distributed in limited numbers, while Deshawn trained civilians in guerrilla explosives. Omar marked artillery positions. Jacob outlined the assault like he was sketching a memory. "They expect us to defend," he said to the gathered officers. "We attack instead. We hit them before they land. No speeches. No mercy." When the Caldron cruisers entered the lower atmosphere, the sky lit in unnatural reds and greens. The resistance opened fire before the enemy had time to deploy. Plasma projectiles met kinetic weapons in midair, carving streaks through the clouds. For the first time, Caldron formations faltered. Jacob fought at the front, leading with cold precision. Every step forward was paid in blood. Deshawn cleared a trench with a single explosive, then fell behind cover, panting. Ethan stayed mobile, cycling power through his armor's internal systems, redirecting energy between shield and propulsion. Omar worked high above, each shot a surgical removal. But the cauldrons were endless. By dusk, they breached the southern corridor. Ethan dragged 2 injured soldiers out of a collapsed tunnel, his leg armor sparking with damage. Deshawn covered the retreat, his detonators wired to fallback lines. At one junction, he turned to Jacob and said, "They're adapting to the sound mines. Frequencies are no longer delaying them." Jacob handed him a new frequency shard, keyed to human heart rhythms. "Try fear." Deshawn smiled grimly. "My specialty." Jacob's team regrouped near the city's ravaged central spire. Above them, the Caldron command ship broke the clouds like a blade through silk. The war was nearing its axis. Lance Harrington contacted them from the Rockies. "We've decrypted part of their internal architecture. They have a central uplink in orbit, a signal spine connecting all local command unit. If you sever it, they go blind." Ethan scanned the schematic. "I can hijack it, but I'll have to be inside the relay chamber. Their core. That's a one-way trip." Jacob placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "We don't win this by surviving." Ethan didn't argue. They launched under cover of debris storms and electromagnetic fog. A stolen Caldron shuttle delivered Jacob, Ethan, Deshawn, and Omar to the underbelly of the mothership. The hull was porous with hexagonal ducts and wet with pulsing light. It felt alive. They breached through a maintenance hatch and entered the nerve pathways. Jacob took point. Omar vanished into the shadows, his role silent and absolute. Deshawn stayed close to Ethan, protecting him as they moved deeper toward the relay core. They encountered resistance in the form of Caldron sentries, bipedal and armored in crystalline plating. Jacob's strikes were surgical, always 2 moves ahead. Deshawn fought with fire and thunder, clearing corridors with explosive pack. Ethan kept recalibrating their direction, interpreting alien symbols through a cracked datapad. Finally, they reached the core, a glowing chamber suspended by gravity wells and humming with layered language. Ethan moved to the interface and began patching in. 3 minutes, he said. Then the floor erupted. Zuroth-Ka descended from the ceiling like a shadow given form. Larger than any of his soldiers, he landed with a weight that cracked the metal beneath his feet. His gaze fixed on Jacob. "You," Zuroth said. "The animal who howls from the darkness." Jacob stepped forward, dropping his rifle. "No," he said. "The man who burns monsters." Their fight was not elegant. It was raw. Flesh against armor. Claw against bone. Zuroth was stronger. Jacob was faster. Pain meant nothing now, only the mission. Deshawn tried to intervene, but a blast from Zuroth sent him crashing into a wall. He did not rise. Ethan shouted, "System breach, complete." The core lights dimmed. Zuroth hesitated. Jacob surged forward and drove a plasma blade into the alien's throat. Zuroth gurgled, eyes wide, trying to speak. Jacob whispered, "You forgot rule number 1. He twisted the blade. Zuroth collapsed. Ethan staggered toward the console. "I can reroute their command protocol. Trigger an overload. But someone has to stay. Manual engagement." Jacob stepped forward. "I'll do it." Ethan shook his head. "No. You lead. I fix things." He smiled. Then he pulled the lever. The floor lit up beneath him. The uplink overloaded. One by one, across the earth, Caldron ships froze, fell, or detonated. Jacob escaped with Omar, barely. The shuttle ejected just as the mothership imploded, collapsing into itself like a dying star. On Earth, silence returned. In the days that followed, the Caldron remnants fled. What leaders remained reassembled broken governments. Survivors built monuments from wreckage. Lance gave speeches about unity. But when the cameras turned off, he always asked the same question. "Where's Jacob?" No one knew. No signal. No trace. Until one night, years later, a deep space array picked up a short transmission on a forgotten frequency. 6 words. "Still watching. Still here. Rule 1. The operator who heard it wrote it down, then erased the record. Some nightmares never end. And some are necessary.